Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. April's right around the corner, so you know what that means. It's time for another TBR board game. I'm very excited for this month because the first few months of the year, I've taken it a little bit easier with making my TBRs. I've limited the number of books that I was reading because I had a wedding to plan, but now the wedding has happened, I'm way less stressed and have a little bit more time on my hands. So it is time to lock in for our 2025 reading, and I'm thinking we up our number of books this month to make this a really fun TBR. So I think I'm going to make an 8-book TBR, and hopefully I don't end up regretting this later. For those that have not been here before, a couple months ago, I made this TBR board game. I took some inspiration from some other TBR board games I saw, but I did put my own spin on this Bookopoly board game. There's quite a few different prompts that we can get while playing this. The most common prompts you'll see is either fantasy or romance, and that really only limits me to the genre. Overall, that is a free pick for whatever I'm feeling within either a fantasy or romance book. I also have 2 TBR jar prompts, a letter generator, a number generator. I love any opportunity to read my Kindle, so I also have some Kindle Unlimited picks. It is always a good idea to force yourself to pick a physical read, so I do have a physical TBR prompt. I will always take any opportunity to support my local library, so we do have a library pick as well. And then our corner pieces are where things can get a little bit fun. I do have lowest rated on my TBR, which I have landed on before, and it was terrible. Free pick, which is obviously my favorite one to land on, and I don't know if I have ever. Potentially only once I've landed on a free pick. And then we also have book you've been avoiding. Overall, there's enough variety so that every time I've played this, it's been completely different, and I'm excited to see what we have in store with 8 different books. Hopefully nothing too crazy. Hopefully the TBR gods are nice to me today, but let's go ahead and hop on in. I've mentioned this before, but since this game isn't the biggest, I only use 1 dice so that we don't get through the prompts too quickly. So here I am at go, and it's time to do our first roll. 1. Starting it off strong with a fantasy book. I will be honest, I've really been on a romance kick. I obviously won't mind sprinkling in some fantasy, but I do hope that this is a romance heavy month. But we're starting it off with a fantasy pick. Always the most fun part of the TBR is actually picking our books. I haven't been too excited for fantasy because I've been really prioritizing finishing the Throne of Glass series. I really ideally would finish that series before we go on our honeymoon at the end of April, but of course I have the 3 longest books now to get through. So if you know anything about Throne of Glass, that means that I am now on to Empire of Storms. However, since I'm slightly unhinged in the head, I do plan on doing the tandem read, so really this fantasy pick is a 2-for-1. I will be adding both of these books to the April TBR. Time to get locked and loaded for about a 1,300 page adventure, and I hope these are good. Time for roll number 2. Another 1. And we have landed on TBR jar. I honestly think for this month, I'm just going to find a TBR prompt generator. So let me go ahead and hop to that whenever I'm upstairs with all of my books. As I mentioned, I'm just gonna find a prompt generator online. So I just searched TBR prompt generator. I'm gonna use my first selection, which says random prompt generator. It allows me to pick a card for our prompt. Let's go ahead and click this one. Published in the last year. Okay, so I'm going to say that this is anything published March 2024 or later. So let's see what we have as our options. I did recently pick up 2 new releases, so I know for sure these can be used. I have the 3rd installment in the When in Rome series by Sarah Adams, Beg, Borrow, or Steal. I think this was published in January, and this book also came out in January, I believe. Out of the Woods by bonam-young. This is the 2nd book in an interconnected standalone that started out with Out on a Limb. I think both of these will be really easy reads. However, the Sarah Adams books are generally in the 3-star range, but Out on a Limb was a 5-star read for me, and I would love to have another highly rated romance. So I'm going to add Out of the Woods by bonam-young. This follows a couple that we met in Out on a Limb. They're high school sweethearts. They've been together for like 17 years, and it seems like they're losing the spark in their relationship. As we watch this marriage in trouble storyline, these 2 make the spontaneous decision to get out of their comfort zone and join a grueling hiking trip intended to guide couples through rough patches. I don't know if I'm going to like this one as much as Out on a Limb because that book was damn near perfect, but I am very hopeful for this one. Time for our 3rd roll. 1, 2, 3, 4. Romance. Perfect. This is exactly what I wanted for this month ahead. The TBR prompts are working out absolutely perfect for me. I rolled my first romance pick of the month, which I am very happy about. And as you can see, I have a lot of romance books to choose from. I would say I'm more naturally inclined to pick some of the new books that I recently hauled because I am just very excited for them. But I'm gonna try and think a little bit more strategically. I know that all 3 of these romance novels are on Kindle Unlimited, and I do have them currently downloaded. So that feels like the perfect selection to make for this month because I could easily read this on my honeymoon since I only plan on bringing my Kindle rather than physical books with me. So the 3 that we're thinking about are Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey mcquiston. This is a male-male romance where we have the president's son falling in love with the Prince of England. I know that it's an enemies to lovers story. There's also a movie that's been made on this, I think on Netflix, that overall I think is pretty highly loved. My friend absolutely loved this book, and I have heard overall really good ratings for this one. Next I have Girl Abroad by Elle Kennedy. I'll be honest, I haven't heard as good of ratings with this one. I think this is more of a YA new adult romance where 19-year-old Abby gets the opportunity to study abroad for a year in London. She arrives at her gorgeous new flat to discover that her roommates are actually all boys. I think there ends up being a little love triangle that happens. The main complaint I've heard about this one is that the main character is pretty immature and possibly a tad bit unsufferable, so I have been actively avoiding this book for quite a long time. And the final book that I am considering is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I know this book is so highly loved. I have unfortunately been a little bit intimidated by this one because I am really 50-50 with Abby Jimenez. Even some of her most famous releases, I haven't fully loved. There's 2 books of hers that were around a 3.5 to 4 stars, and then the other 2 books were like 2 stars, really did not enjoy it all. So this book is kind of make or break it for Abby Jimenez. I don't know if she's for sure the author for me. I've been intimidated to pick this up because what if I don't like it? So I am a little bit torn on what to do with these. I think the book that I'm most inclined to like is going to be Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey mcquiston. So I'm gonna keep it easy for myself and add this one to my April TBR. Time for our 4th book. Another one, and that takes us to another fantasy pick. Getting a little nervous because I don't know if I'm wanting a 3rd fantasy book, but I'll try to remain hopeful for now. Another fantasy pick. As you could probably imagine, I'm a little bit intimidated by this one because of the first fantasy books that I added to this list. If I think about the shortest / easiest fantasy novels that I probably have on my TBR, the shortest by far is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I think this is going to be a very highly rated book. This is a cozy fantasy following Emily Wilde and her academic rival as they travel to create and study her Encyclopedia of Fairies. The only thing is I don't know if this is giving spring summer. I feel like this is more of a wintry read, so I'm not super inclined to add this right now because I do kind of like to match the seasons that I'm reading in. And that's a similar feeling for a lot of these fantasy picks. A lot of these are screaming fall winter to me. Potentially Foxglove I could think about. That's book 2 in the Belladonna series. But because I was so brave and added 2 Throne of Glass books to this TBR, I think I'm gonna add an audiobook for this one. I only have 1 book left in the Caraval series, and that would be Finale. Book 2 ended off on a crazy cliffhanger. I really don't even know what to expect with this 3rd book because there was such a big reveal at the end of book 2. Overall, these audiobooks are so quick and easy to get through. They're generally only like 10 or 11 hours. So I'm gonna add Finale by Stephanie Garber as our 2nd fantasy pick. All right, already halfway through, time for our 5th roll. 2. 1, 2. Perfect. This is basically a free pick, but we have to stick to something that's on my physical TBR. I feel like halfway through the TBR board game wanted to be a little bit nice to me. Giving me a physical TBR pick is very easy. I basically have free range for whatever I want. And as I'm sure you guys can imagine, I'm probably gonna stay away from the fantasy side of things and stick to some romance. There are quite a few I'm considering, again, with those new books that I recently purchased, but I'm going to pick probably the shortest book out of everything on my TBR, and that is Expiration Dates by Rebecca serle. Really don't know how to say this last name, but what I do love about Miss Rebecca is that she wrote a book that is only 255 pages. Absolutely love that for me. The premise of this one sounds so fun. It's a magical realism romance. Every time our main character Daphne meets a new man, she receives a slip of paper with his name and a number on it, the exact amount of time they'll be together. However, on the night of a blind date, there's only a name, Jake. So I think we're gonna follow her trying to figure out, what does this mean? Does that mean Jake is in game? But I just love that this is going to be such a short and sweet book to get through. I hope that the page count doesn't end up being the downfall of this book and that there isn't enough emotional development, but I will be sure to report back and let you guys know how this goes. Let's go ahead and roll for our 6th book. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh boy, the TBR gods are definitely playing some games today. We have a book that I've been avoiding. Can't say I'm too happy about this prompt. I am still going to stick to my romance section because while I'm not actively picking up a lot of fantasy books, I wouldn't say I'm avoiding them. I'm just waiting until the right time of year or I'm in the mood for them. There are a couple books on the romance side that I have actually been avoiding, and unfortunately I already mentioned one of them and admitted to avoiding it. That would be Girl Abroad by Elle Kennedy. But as I mentioned before, hopefully a pro of this book is that it is on Kindle Unlimited. I can say this for my honeymoon, it can be very easy to access and read. And I actually think the honeymoon is the perfect time to read this because it will be fun to read about a girl going abroad while I am abroad as well. So we're gonna add Girl Abroad by Elle Kennedy, and I'm a little scared about it. 7th roll, and I really feel like we need a nice prompt. I'm really hoping for either Kindle Unlimited or romance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which takes us back to go. So we're gonna go ahead and do another roll. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Perfect. Right into a romance. 7th pick, a romance. This will be a very romance heavy month. Not that I'm mad about that. That is exactly what I wanted. But let's talk about some books maybe I haven't mentioned yet so far. I would love to get to You With a View by Jessica Joyce. I read The X-Files by this author a couple months ago, gave it a 5 stars, absolutely loved this. I also read the holiday novella that she wrote recently, and I decently liked it. I think I just really enjoy her writing. I added this to my TBR for March, I believe, but I just didn't have any time to get to it. This is following 2 former high school enemies who must reunite for a road trip, inspired by their grandparents' broken engagement and this electric debut romance. I think this would be something that's decently rated by me, and since I've already read from this author before, it's less intimidating to pick up. Next book would be The Fake Mate by Lana Ferguson. This is a steamy wolf shifter paranormal romance, and I think they're also both doctors as well. Quite a few different things we got going on with this plot, but strangely enough, every person I've heard read this has given it a 5 stars, and that seems pretty crazy to do with a paranormal romance. So even though I haven't read from Lana Ferguson before, I also think this is going to be a very highly rated book. And finally, another romance on my mind would be The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels by India Holton. I recently hauled 2 of her books, and they all sound really fun. They're giving historical romance, they're giving rom-com, but they're also giving fantastical elements. So I think there's a lot going on here that would keep me entertained and interested. On the back of the book, it says, a prim and proper lady thief must save her aunt from a crazed pirate and his dangerously charming henchman in this fantastical historical romance. I think this would be a bit different than the other romances that I have on my TBR currently. I don't think it's too long either. It's just over 300 pages. So while I think those other romances are going to be great, I think adding in a historical romance would be a fun time. I'm gonna add The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels. 8th and final roll. Let's see how we're ending our April TBR. 1, 2, 3. Another physical TBR prompt. It's a good thing I did a book haul recently because we are reading a lot of physical books this month. And our final pick of April is basically a free pick. Since I've gone absolutely crazy on the romances, I already have 5 on the TBR. I'm going to force myself to pick a fantasy. Since I am pushing myself through Throne of Glass, the main thing I'm wanting is to pick something that's pretty easy to enter into. I don't want an epic high stakes fantasy. I want something that's a little bit easier to read. And that makes me think of these 2 books in particular. I mentioned earlier Foxglove by Adalyn Grace, the second book book in the Belladonna series. I don't know if this would qualify completely as a cozy fantasy, but it's definitely easy to grasp. The other book I'm considering is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This is the start of a YA sci-fi series where we follow Spenza, who's always dreamed of becoming a fighter pilot, but since this is sci-fi, it would be a pilot in space. So I think this is giving like YA Star Wars basically. I know this is the start of a pretty decently long series, but since they're YA, it's very easy to read and comprehend. So I have the choice of either starting something new or continuing a series I'm already in the middle of, and it would probably be a good idea to continue something that I've already started. We're following our same characters that we followed in book 1, so we will be continuing Signa and Death's story. I'm excited to see what happens in this. It is kind of decently long, 450 pages, but let's push ourselves and add Foxglove to the April TBR. I won't tell a lie. I think this is going to be an absolutely crazy month. There are a lot of books that I'm trying to commit to reading. We will see how this goes, but let's go ahead and do a quick recap. This month is going to start in the absolute most crazy way. I will be attempting the tandem read within the Throne of Glass series with Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn. From there, the TBR jar picked something that was released within this past year, so I chose Out of the Woods by Hannah Bonam-Young for a romance that is also luckily on Kindle Unlimited as well. I chose Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. For another fantasy pick, I'm going to be listening to Finale by Stephanie Garber as an audiobook. For a physical TBR selection, I chose the shortest book possible, and that is Expiration Dates by Rebecca Serle? I still don't know how to say that last name. For a book I've been avoiding, I'm gonna try and get through Girl Abroad by Elle Kennedy. For a fun fantastical romance, I'm picking up The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels by India Holton. And finally, for another physical TBR selection, I will be continuing the Belladonna series with Foxglove by Adalyn Grace. And that will be the end of the video. Send some prayers for this April TBR. Let me know what you have on your April TBR and if you've read any of the books that I mentioned today. For now, this is where I would love you and leave you, so thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye guys!